Hello, fellow road trippers, and welcome to episode 15 of the RV Connects podcast. On this episode, one of our kids throws up, another one lies to a border patrol agent, Dan experiences life and death while hugging a cliff in coastal California, and Melina meets Bruce Willis. Keep listening to determine which of these events is dead-on accurate and which is slightly exaggerated for dramatic effect. As always, I'm Melina, and I am joined by my stellar husband, Dan.
Hello, folks.
To bring you the best travel tips and tricks to make your RVing experience one for the books. Whether you're new to the podcast or you've joined us for the whole ride, welcome. The RV community is a really unique and awesome one, and we're always thrilled to hear the travel stories and adventures of those of you who are just getting started on your journey or are veterans of the road. So keep reaching out on Instagram and Facebook at RV Connects, because we love to share in your trials and triumphs on the road. There are no wrong ways to RV, but there are so many right ways to do it. And in sharing our experiences, we hope that our little Canadian family of four can inspire you to travel further than you thought possible as weekend wanderers and really see some of the iconic sites that North America has to offer. And speaking of iconic sites, today we are embarking on leg 3 of our 2018 Route 66 adventure, which took us roughly 9,500 kilometers, so about 5,900 miles, give or take, from our home in Southwestern Ontario all the way down Route 66 to California, where we explored for a week before looping back north through Nevada, Utah, Colorado, Kansas, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, and then finally back across the border home. So if you haven't listened to the first 2 legs of the journey, go check out episodes 13 and 14, which I will link to in the show notes. And those had us visiting some of the most famous and beautiful sites of Route 66. So we ended episode 14 on day 6, which we spent at the Grand Canyon. And we'll pick up the trail on day 7 as we leave Williams, Arizona and head for California.
So the original plan when we left home was to follow old Route 66 from Arizona to California. But along the way, I think at the Midpoint Cafe, we picked up the Easy 66 Guide for Travelers. And boy, are we glad we did.
Yeah.
So old Route 66 is really old Route 66. And the guide advised against taking anything longer than 24 feet through some of those portions. We're at 29 feet plus an F-150. So we were certainly well past being able to...
I think we're closer to like 50 feet.
Yeah, we were not going to snake our way down those roads. But having the Easy 66 guide was great because we could scoot along the interstate and jump off and see more than enough stuff to keep us entertained and feeling like we got the experience.
Mm-hmm. And it was sad kind of for me because I really wanted to visit Oatman, which is a bit of a tourist trap, but they have like wild donkeys that roam the streets in downtown Oatman. If they're like downtown is pretty much like a one street town, but I really wanted to see it and I thought it would be really cool. But the problem is the section of the Oatman Highway, so Old Route 66 between Kingman and Oatman, there's hairpin turns where basically if you go around some of these hairpin turns, you will see the back of your trailer, which nobody wants to happen. And it's like cliff face and expands into nothingness on the other side. So there is a little bit of Route 66 that you can see before that point, though. You can still catch a bit of old Route 66 between Seligman and Kingman, Arizona. But you'll want to get back on the I-40 at Kingman for the rest of the route and skip Oatman altogether. It's really, 7.5 hours from Williams, Arizona to Anaheim.
Yeah, and I think we had a pretty good day that day. I still remember getting in while the sun was still up.
Yep.
So it wasn't too bad of a day.
It started a little rocky, though, for some of us.
Yep. Where do we start with? Well, with Fee tossing her cookies or
sure.
Island the border?
Fiona made the wise decision of eating Skittles for breakfast, and she already gets carsick a little bit especially when we leave really early. So she did not eat. I mean, I packed box lunches this day, but she decided she wasn't going to eat that. She was going to eat some Skittles that she found in the back seat. So she essentially tasted the rainbow twice, as she likes to say, once going down and once coming up. So we had some stuff we needed to clean up in the truck. So we had to stop at a gas station to do that.
Yeah, I think we scooted into Isla was telling us about it today. We scooted into a truck stop and you took her back into the trailer and got a clean set of clothes and got her cleaned up. Isla and I went to Dunkin' Donuts. That's all Isla remembers is a trip to Dunkin' Donuts.
Of course.
And then we kind of moseyed on down the highway after that.
Mm-hmm. So we did stop, actually. We stopped in Kingman for groceries because we had basically just loaded up on groceries. And I was driving after this, right? You took the passenger seat. The closer we got to California, I started seeing signs saying like all vehicles must pull over, like be prepared to stop at the checkpoint and stuff. And I was like, Dan, like what is this? And he said, oh no, it's
keep in mind, when you drive a highway in Canada, there is no toll booth, there's no checkpoint, there's no reason to stop. Even on a toll route in Canada, it's all run by video camera. And so there's no reason to stop. So when we travel in the U.S., we're pretty used to having to stop every 10 miles and toss somebody a bunch of quarters and nickels to go on down the highway. So it didn't seem weird that we were going to have to stop.
Mm-hmm. But you had said at that point, you're like, no, that's for tractor trailers. It's like a tractor trailer weigh station or whatever, where they have to stop and show their logs and stuff. And I was like, yeah, I'm not seeing that information there. So I think it's everybody. And of course, when we get to the Arizona-California border, it's like a border checkpoint, and they're checking for like fruits, vegetables, meats, firewood, like, because California is super like locked down when it comes to all of that stuff.
Yeah. So, my first go-to line is don't worry about it, because 9 times out of 10, there's nothing to worry about. I didn't really know what was going to happen, but nevertheless, Melina was driving. I was in the back seat. Fiona, because she had tossed her cookies, was sitting in the front seat, and we pull up to the booth. And when we say there's a border patrol or a border guard, I don't really know what they're called. We're just crossing from Arizona into California, and Melina puts down her window, and the gentleman asks, do you have any fruits and vegetables? And Melina's like,
I'm stalling because I know full well we just went to the grocery store.
There are coolers spilling over with apples and grapes in the back seat. And now he's starting to get a little agitated because he knows full well that we understand the question.
Well, I wasn't essentially stating, like, Kingman is pretty close to the border in terms of like how close it is to California anyway, and it's like a name brand grocery store. It's not, we weren't stopping at farmers markets or anything like that. But I wasn't stalling because I didn't want to tell him. I was like literally trying to remember, like, oh, we just stopped, like, what did we get? What do we have? Do we have meat? Do we have fruits? What kind of fruits? How much fruits? And as Dan rolls down his window, we had our cooler in the backseat, because we've talked before about how we keep box lunches and snacks in the backseat of the truck. And Isla, who
shouldn't be involved in the conversation at this point.
And she's 9 at this point. She literally lifts the lid of the cooler, looks into the lid of the cooler, slams it shut, and she says, nope, no fruits or vegetables in here. And you can see the guy just kind of rolls his eyes, and he sighs this long sigh, and then he looks at me and he says, okay, do you have any firewood? And I was like, no, we don't have any firewood. And he's like, okay, have a good day. And then we go along the road, and then we pull away, and Isla literally opens up the cooler, and she's like, there's grapes in it. So this kid, like, without missing a beat, just totally open-faced lied right to the guy.
Well, and you know what? I think the lesson for all the travelers, especially if you're from Canada, is maybe sometimes you got to check these things out. But if anybody here is ever going from Arizona to California, maybe just wait and get your groceries in California.
Yeah. But don't wait too far into California to get gas.
So going along, because remember, Fiona has tossed her cookies and Melina's driving, and I'm in the back seat. I generally, at the beginning of each day, take a look at the route. I get the Flying J app out, and I check out where all the truck stops are. And I kind of, in my head, I don't pick where we're going to stop, but I know where all the truck stops are. So at any given time, I know if we get to a certain point and the gas tank is under half or under a quarter, I know we need to pull over for gas. I thought today would be a good day to have a little snooze in the back seat. And I knew where we needed to stop for gas, but I didn't tell Melina where we needed to stop for gas, so Melina kept on driving. And as we drove through the California desert, which was full of warnings of, bring enough water and don't break down. And, I think we were pretty much concerned that if the truck broke down and we pulled off to the side of the highway, the sun would just evaporate us into the atmosphere.
Mm-hmm. It was hot that day. I actually went back and looked at the historical temperature records, and it was literally 113 degrees the day we were driving from Arizona to California. So that's about 45 degrees Celsius for our Canadian listeners, and that is hot. And that wasn't even like there's no humidex. It's just hot desert heat. It was super hot. And when I ended up actually waking Dan up to say, like, hey, we really need gas. Can you find the next gas station? And then I got grief because we didn't stop before. Anyway, we ended up stopping for gas at pretty much the only gas station that was within several hundred miles. And it was in a little town called Fenner, California. And when we say desert, this is literally like on the south end of the Mojave National Preserve. Like, so it's in the desert.
And keep in mind, we're Canadians. We're not built for this.
And so we stopped at this place and literally gas was like $5.25 a gallon, which is insane. I didn't calculate that into how much it is per liter, but to give you an example, like the US average is $2.12 a gallon. So we paid over double what the national average is at this gas station, and literally everything in there. I think milk was like $7. Like everything was overpriced because they can. It's like literally the only joint in town. So we ended up having to get a very expensive tank of gas, which didn't make Dan the happiest, considering we've already talked about his need to have the best mileage and lowest fuel costs.
Listen, the lesson out of this experience is to make sure that you plan out your gas station trips and maybe let your co-pilot know where you need to stop, because I think that you probably should be prepared when you're driving through the desert to make sure you got extra water, lots of gas, trucks well maintained, because like I said, Canadians are not built for this kind of weather. And I think we would have been in some serious trouble if something had broken down or we had run out of gas.
Okay, he says Canadians aren't built for it. I'm totally okay with it, but it is hot.
Okay, this kid's not built for it.
But then again, I'm not built for Canadian winters, and I'm literally Canadian, so I don't know. It was all better, though. We stopped in Barstow, California for some ice cream, and then everyone was happy again, so we continued on our way.
So, at this point, lessons for all our travelers. When you cross from Arizona into California, keep an eye on the fruits and vegetables. They're not so fond of you bringing them into California. Make sure that you know where your gas stations are, because you're going to pay through the nose for the gas if you miss a gas stop. And don't let your kid have Skittles for breakfast.
Which I feel should be like parenting 101, but what happens in the backseat stays in the backseat, apparently, and we don't often know what goes on back there. So anyway, at the end of a very long travel day, we arrived at the Anaheim Harbor RV Park, which is basically a slab of concrete in the middle of a city. But if you are going to visit Disneyland like we were, it is absolutely hands down the best place to go in Anaheim with your RV. So a couple of things, it's very clean facilities. It's exactly 1 mile from the park gates of Disneyland. So it takes about, I would say like 15 minutes to walk at a leisurely pace.
Yeah. If you don't want to have to take the bus, it's an easy walk.
Mm-hmm. But if you do want to take the bus, or you have mobility issues or what have you, there is a shuttle bus that runs, and it stops right at the gates of the RV park and takes you right down South Harbor Boulevard, 1 mile exactly, and turns into the drop-off point for Disneyland. So that you can buy tickets you can buy them online, or you can buy them at the office of the RV park. So we ended up getting what is considered a premium site. So I want to talk about that a little bit. So essentially, the regular sites were basically, consider like an RV. It's just like a paved parking lot, right? And you had lines, and you backed into your line, and that was your site, right? And you might be able to pull out your awning, and that was about it before the next site. So premium sites were basically double wide, and then they had a strip of like artificial turf. So where your awning would be. So your awning would go out, you would have a picnic table and a little patch of artificial turf. And we opted for that. It was a little more expensive, but my brother and my sister-in-law and my niece were driving down from Vancouver to meet us and spend the week with us in California inside our trailer. So we wanted to have that little bit of outdoor space. There's a small pool there, super clean. I did laundry there. We showered at the buildings. We used the washrooms. Like, it was fantastically clean, really well maintained.
Yeah, the park's not got a big footprint, but I would also tell you it's really close to gas stations. You can walk over to Disney if that's your destination. You're close to the interstate if you're going to go see other stuff. You're close to Walmart if you need to can just go get more supplies and more groceries and whatnot. So really convenient, but you're right in the neighborhood. Like, I remember one day I just took a walk and walked through the neighborhood, and people were having their Sunday barbecues and family over. Mm-hmm.
And the one thing about the RV park is that you do have to enter coming a certain direction. I think you have to go south, down South Harbor Boulevard to enter the park. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to make the turn with a rig. But you can look that up on their website.
Definitely not a showstopper. I wouldn't worry about it.
No, not at all. And they do have 24-hour security. Like, they have nighttime. We came back late at night a couple of times from the park, and they have a security booth right at the entrance of the park with somebody there staffed all night long, and then they have the park staff on staff all day. So a really great place to go if that's going to be your home base for a few days to go do Disneyland and anything else in kind of Southern California. We got there on July 4th, which was fantastic because literally from the RV park, you can see the tip of the Matterhorn from the RV park. So on July 4th, of course, they do like a fantastic, very special fireworks show that is not one of the ones they do every night, obviously for the 4th of July. And so basically, if you sit at your RV every night and you're not in the park, you get a free fireworks show because it's almost right over your head. So we pulled up, we parked, it got dark, my brother and his family arrived, we had some dinner, and we got this fantastic fireworks show right from our RV. So it was a perfect location to kind of start off the Disneyland portion of our trip.
And it's right by a place called Shakey's Pizza, which...
Fantastic pizza.
Yeah, never heard of it before, but was like walking distance.
It was
you
literally
couldn't even
next
drive.
door.
It was literally next door.
Yeah, I think it was probably, 50 feet from our RV to the front door of Shakey's Pizzeria. But it was really good pizza. Fantastic.
If I remember correctly, it's the sauce that makes the difference.
Yeah. I think the sauce was kind of almost like, it almost tasted like it was tomato sauce, but it almost tasted a little bit sweet. So they must have some kind of magical ingredient.
Do you want me to talk about Disney World and Disneyland?
Sure.
Okay, so you have to remember that Melina is the Disney aficionado, the expert, the all things knowing of Disney. And for me, Disney is a bit like my wedding. I just show up and she's done all the planning for it. So we are pretty experienced at going to Disney World in Florida. And Disney World in Florida is like a bubble. You don't see the outside world really if you're staying on resort or in the campground down there. So really, when you're at Disney, you're at Disney. Now, Disneyland in California is in the city, and you're going to see the city as you get right up to the front gates of the park, and there's restaurants and hotels and all the good and bad things that the city has. So it's a little bit of a different experience. I would say it's nice in the fact that it's a little bit of a smaller footprint, and so it's a little bit easier, I find, to navigate from one park to the next. Mm-hmm. It's kind of just a quick walking over, but I think from an organizational perspective and a staff member experience, I probably would lean a little bit more to Florida, but always was happy to be there in California too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like Dan says, like we would walk to the park every day. That was primarily how we got there because we didn't want to have to deal with parking garages and parking lots and things like that. So we would walk and just take our time getting there. But, you know, you're passing homeless people and you're having those conversations with your kids because it's totally different. Like I'm from the West Coast, so I have been to Disneyland several times, but with taking the kids this time, like they're used to that very magical, contrived Walt Disney World experience. So we did have some of those conversations. Like you walk up to the Disneyland gates and there's like the Prop 65 signs all over Disneyland that say, you know, some of the attractions and buildings and stuff, you know, may have paint on them that causes cancer because like some of them are so old they probably still have lead paint. So it's California, so you have to have all these warnings everywhere, and like it's just a very different experience, but no less interesting and no less cool. It's just different if you've only been to Walt Disney World. But there is something super special about, you know, walking in Walt's footsteps, and I'm going to nerd out here a little bit, but you know, going to the original park and seeing the original attractions as they were designed by Walt and how it's changed over the years. And that part is super, super cool. So when we got there, we basically watched our fireworks. We had a good sleep. The next day we went to Disneyland, and that was day 8 of our journey. And we decided to treat the girls and my niece with a stay at Disney's Grand Californian Hotel. So we got a 2-bedroom, like kind of condo type unit in the hotel for one night. And we went to Disneyland for the day, did our rides. We came back to the trailer, packed our bags. My sister-in-law and I checked everybody into the hotel. We went to Walmart. We got the makings for a really great plate of nachos, and we went back to the hotel and we made fantastic nachos for dinner. One of the most amazing things about this hotel, and it is a splurge to stay there for sure, but right out our balcony was the lights and the park of Disney's California Adventure. So from our balcony, we could see, you know, Mickey's Fun Wheel and the Incredicoaster, and all of the lights of Disney's California Adventure and Pixar Pier are right outside your room. It was the coolest thing. And even at like 3 o'clock in the morning, when you would wake up, if you needed to use the bathroom, like the lights are still going outside, and it was just super neat. Of course, I mean, it's Disney. They have their hospitality down pat. So, you know, the pools are incredible. The restaurants are incredible. Everything about it is fantastic. And that night after dinner, there's a separate gate from the Disney's Grand Californian Hotel that you can get right into California Adventure Park. So at night, when it was dark, we went back into California Adventure Park to visit Cars Land, which was kind of that culminating trip from our Route 66 journey, is that the kids wanted to see Radiator Springs in real life, at Cars Land, which was kind of a dream come true for them. I remember Fiona's face, and she's 12 at this point. She's almost 13, but this was her favorite movie growing up. And watching her face go into Radiator Springs, and she's kind of like, oh my gosh, I always wanted to come here as a kid watching this movie. And it was so neat to see. It is done to the nine. So, the You Drop In Kanoko station, that's also Ramon's paint shop, to see that in real life, and Flo's V8 Cafe, and they have, I'm going to say life-size cars of Mater and Lightning McQueen that are all automated, and they talk to you and they drive around. It's the neatest place.
If I could only do one thing, that would be the one thing that I would want to do, is go there at night. Mm-hmm. And it was just awesome. Okay, so in and amongst this, we took a day trip to Santa Monica Pier and drove in. So a couple things. We drive an F-150 with a crew cab, tow mirrors, and a 6.5-foot box. The point I'm trying to make is it's a really big truck. And if you've ever driven in somewhere like Toronto or Hamilton in Canada, to go downtown and find a parking spot for that vehicle would be really, really hard. But when we went to Santa Monica Pier, we could park literally 2 blocks from the pier in a parking garage, and it was no problem at all. And parking was really cheap.
It was $8, I think, for the day.
Oh, yeah. And if you were in Toronto, it would be $35, and you good luck trying to get a spot anywhere we actually wanted to be. So we were right downtown, easy parking, easy to get to, well worth the effort to go down there, because I was a little worried, to be honest with you. Maybe you want to describe the pier, and then I'll describe the action at the end.
Sure, yeah. So like Dan said, we parked, 100 feet from the end of the pier. So the reason we wanted to go to the pier was because that's where the Route 66 official end of the trail sign is. So it was super important to us that we made it. We were standing in front of the sign, and all these people are just walking past us, no big deal, going about their day, and we're smiling like a bunch of happy idiots in front of the sign. And I just wanted to scream at them. It's don't you know where we came from? We did it. So yeah, I wanted to jump up and down and scream because I was so excited that we had actually made it. So we had our picture taken in front of the sign. We walked down to the end of the pier, and Santa Monica Pier is cool. It has a roller coaster on it. It has midway games. It has rides. It has restaurants. And way down at the end of the pier, there is a bait and tackle shop, which is also the last stop shop. So it's right at the end of the pier. There's a tribute to Bob Waldmeyer, who is a fascinating, very famous artist. And he is famous for his whimsical maps of Route 66 and the iconic sights to see on Route 66. So he passed away in 2009, but they have this tribute to him at the end of the pier, which is super cool. And he owned a 1934 gas station in Hackberry, Arizona on Old Route 66. He, of course, was the artist. His dad owned the Cozy Dog Drive-In restaurant in Springfield, Illinois on Route 66. And his orange VW microbus is actually in the Route 66 Hall of Fame. And it's that vehicle that was the inspiration for Fillmore in the Disney Pixar Cars movie. And one interesting thing I found out about Bob is that his ashes were actually scattered at the beginning and the end of Route 66, as well as a little bit on his parents' graves, I think in Illinois. And then he had picked select locations along Route 66 for people to go, or his loved ones to go and spread his ashes, which I think is kind of cool. You basically, if you eat any food on the pier, you need to beware of seagulls and pigeons.
Yep.
Dan does not enjoy birds. I'll just say that. But he was getting incredibly angry at all of the birds trying to steal his french fries. So he actually got up and left. He walked off the pier.
I don't like birds like people don't like snakes and spiders.
Yeah, there's a bit of a phobia there. So if you're going to do that, just maybe, you could probably take it down to the beach or take it off the pier, because those birds are perched and they know that food is there, and they will peck your eyeballs out to get at that hot dog. So that's something to be aware of if you have anybody in your family who is uncomfortable with birds. But after we ate, we did go down to the beach, which was absolutely packed. I mean, it was a heat wave, so everybody kind of rushes to the beach. But the problem was there was red flag warnings all along the beach.
Let me set the stage for the beach.
Okay.
from my perspective, the pier does not cost you any money if you don't want it to cost you any money. So if you just want to buy food, you can just buy food. You just walk up and down the pier. The whole experience is like being on a Baywatch episode. There's people everywhere. There's Ferraris, really cool F-150s. And there's people having disagreements and the odd fight on the beach, and there's people playing beach volleyball, and it's packed with people, and every detail is just like Baywatch, right down to the lifeguards. And the lifeguard stands like their little observation posts.
Yeah. So we actually didn't bring our swimsuits for this day at the beach, but we did, we were all wearing shorts, and we got in the ocean, up to our knees really, but we weren't swimming because of the red flag warnings. There was a huge, the waves were incredibly high. There was a huge riptide. The weather was rife for making swimming probably not the best when the beach is already packed, and we have small kids with us who probably aren't the strongest swimmers. So we actually didn't swim that day at the beach, but we did see a rescue.
Yeah. So when I say it was a real Baywatch episode, we were on the beach. People were in the water that shouldn't be in the water. The kids are kind of playing in the sand and splashing in the water at the edge. And there's a lifeguard there. And she couldn't have been more than 120 pounds soaking wet. And she's doing her lifeguard thing. And there's a fellow way out there, had to be a couple 100 meters out there. And he was a big kid. He had to be at least 300 meters. And he got into trouble. And this lady pounded through the surf, swam out to him, got him, and dragged him all the way back. And saved his life, basically. And so we saw a real-life Baywatch episode, a real-life rescue, and thank you to those lifeguards, because I can see how that would be a really, really stressful job, trying to keep track of those thousands of people and finding that one person out there who's not going to make it.
And man, she must have been gassed. Phenomenal physical effort it requires to go out there and bring somebody back through that is insane. And then she probably would have had, if it was the beginning of her shift, she'd be out there for another couple hours.
Well, she just kept on doing the rest of her shift.
Yeah.
So have some respect for those people out there.
Totally. They're definitely there to save your life, but they don't want to have to. So, heed the flags, the warnings on the beach, and your own capabilities, I guess, before you go diving in. So that was day 9. That was the day we checked out of the Grand Californian, which we really didn't want to. It was fantastic. Days 10 and 11, we went back to Disneyland. So, because we had a 3-day pass to Disneyland. So we just kind of explored, walked from park to park. They have fantastic sourdough at Pixar Pier. There is a sourdough bakery, which you can go through. You can actually walk through and see them making the sourdough, and they will give samples. Unfortunately, our girls kept disappearing and going back through the sample line. So I hope the people working there didn't recognize them, because they were like little sourdough hounds. But we did purchase stuff. We bought a massive loaf of sourdough. It was probably, I'm going to say it was bigger than 12 inches. It was probably 16 by 16. This big Mickey head. It was in the shape of Mickey's head with his face on it and everything, the sourdough bread. And we brought it back to the trailer, and my brother sliced it open, and we went to the grocery store, we got lettuce and meat and all the fixings, and we made probably the world's biggest Mickey head sandwich, and the 7 of us just dove in and ate it. And there was still leftovers, I think, the next day. It was fantastic. So get the sourdough bread if you are at Pixar Pier. The last day at Disneyland, we basically went on all the rides, but these guys all decided they wanted to go ahead and ride Space Mountain. Space Mountain is not my favorite. I don't like roller coasters in the dark, and I never have liked Space Mountain. I was 6 the first time I rode it, I think, or I was just at that height where I could ride it, and not a huge fan. So these guys decided they were going to go off on Space Mountain. I grabbed my camera and I just started walking around Disneyland and just kind of was lost in my own childhood memories. I decide, you know what, I'm feeling in a good mood. I'm going to go get some ice cream at the ice cream shop. So I go and I am about to get into line at the ice cream shop. And there's a toddler just having a day. And his mom is down at his level, talking to him, trying to get him calmed down. And she says to me, "Oh, go ahead of us. It's okay." And I was like, "I can wait." And she's like, No, it's okay. We're going to be a while. So I go past her into the line of the ice cream shop. And clearly her husband is ahead of her, thinking that I'm her, because he turns around expecting me to be his wife. And he says, "What are you having?" And I look up and I'm staring at this guy. And I'm like, why does he look so familiar? And my brain is turning. And I'm like, I'm in California. Who do I know in California? And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's Bruce Willis. And I was like, is it Bruce Willis? And then I finally managed to stammer chocolate chip cookie dough. And then he's like, "Oh." He's like, "Good choice." And he turns back around and I'm like, that was Bruce Willis. I'm like, I think I'm standing behind Bruce Willis right now. And I literally was like, is it Bruce Willis? Because he had a ball cap on, but then he had this shirt that said like B-Dog. Like they all had Disney matching shirts and it said B-Dog on it. And I was like, I think it is. And so I'm like discreetly on my phone trying to be like, what does Bruce Willis look like today? Because I was like, all of my versions of Bruce Willis are like movie versions, and probably some of them were like 20 years old. I was like, I totally think I'm standing behind Bruce Willis. And he literally turns around and looks at me a couple of times, and then eventually his wife gets in the line. And so of course I let her in front of me, and they start chatting, and they get their ice cream, and I order my ice cream. And then you order your ice cream, then you have to go off and wait, and they call your name when your ice cream is done. So they wait for their ice cream, and then they get their ice cream, and then I get my ice cream. And as like, he has this ice cream cone in hand, and then he just turns around and looks at me and gives me this look like, yeah, I'm Bruce Willis. And then he walks out of the ice cream shop. And I walk out of the ice cream shop onto the street, and there's a parade going on, and it's basically his family, but then they have like a dedicated Disneyland guide that's taking them through the park. And I was like, well, now I know it's Bruce Willis because they have their own private, entourage and this guide that's taking them around Disney World. And all the kids are licking their ice cream, and then they go off. And then I look like an idiot because I can't form words when he's asking me even like what kind of ice cream I want. And then he walks past me as they like start exiting the area of the ice cream shop. And then he touches my arm as he's walking past me. He's like, how do you like that chocolate chip cookie dough? And then I still couldn't answer. I was like, as he was like 2 blocks away. And I'm like, it's great. And then I was like, dang it. Like all of the things I could have said. And the funny thing is, Bruce Willis is literally my brother's favorite actor on the planet. And he's on Space Mountain right now. And I'm standing here like an idiot, not being able to form words. So, still now, it's 2 years later, and I'm still like in my head, like I could have said all kinds of cool stuff. I could have said cool stuff. And I stood there and looked like an idiot, and he knew I looked like an idiot because he literally touched me on the arm specifically to ask me how my ice cream was, as in just to prove to me, like, yeah, man, it's me. Like, eat it up. Like, oh, I felt like such an idiot. But that was my I met Bruce Willis at Disneyland story. And I'm sure he probably doesn't even think about it now. But I think about it every day. So Bruce Willis, if I ever get to meet you again, I promise I'll have words. Anyway. My brother was really upset that he got off the ride, and I texted them and told them that it was, I had just met Bruce Willis and like literally talked to him. And yeah. Makes me sad to this day. So anyway, that wraps up Disneyland. Let's talk about the next day.
Yeah, so the next day we checked out of the RV park in Anaheim. We were making a short jaunt up to Pismo Beach. It's about 3.5 hours, about 200 miles north of Anaheim. And we drove through LA. Don't ask me what highway we drove on, but what I remember is we got to see the famous Hollywood sign, and I was not expecting that. We got to see these people who live in their vans, and just everything that you could see was just kind of really cool. We
got to introduce Fiona to In-N-Out Burger, which was really exciting.
Yeah, we went to an In-N-Out Burger, which was just really fun because Isla went off with her uncle and aunt and cousin, and they did a bit of a day trip, and they met us at the end of the day. At the end of the day, we get to Pismo Beach, and Pismo Beach is this really cool beach town. And I'll let Melina describe it. But as we pull into the RV park,
which was Pismo Sands RV Park,
really nice park, really good. Not a lot of complaints. What surprised me a little bit was turning left into the RV park. You would think they would have the driveway graded in such a fashion that you wouldn't knock your weight distribution hitch bar off the trailer as you pulled in. But nevertheless, we bottomed out with the hitch, knocked the bar right off, and basically got ourselves into the campsite.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, a typical RV park. I mean, it was in suburbia. Like, our original plan or our dream was to stay at the state park in Pismo Beach because you can actually drive on the beach. You can camp right on the beach. But of course, that fills up really quickly. And by the time we started planning our trip, like, it was February of that year, and this trip was in July. So all of those campsites, I think, in the state park opened up like January 1st or something. So there was no chance we were getting a site on the beach, which was okay. We were just outside of like Pismo proper. So it was a little far to walk, but Parking was ample, just street parking and whatnot when we went into Pismo Beach. But specifically in Pismo is the coolest vibe. Like, it's just, they have like a longboard competition every year. It's kind of still got that really cool surf town vibe that isn't overrun. Like, we were there in the middle of the summer and it still wasn't overrun with people. I would say the only thing there was lineups for was the Splash Cafe, which is literally world famous for their clam chowder. They serve clam chowder in these big bread bowls, and it's a cafe that's been there for like 30, 40 years. And the lineup was like around the building all the time. But we went there specifically for Old West Cinnamon Rolls, which is right off the beach. And that's been there for like 40 years. They have so many different styles of cinnamon bun, and literally one bun will do you. Like, that's your probably caloric intake for like 2 days. They're huge, but it'll do you for the day. Like, it's fantastic. So when we went into Pismo Beach for the day with my brother and his wife and my niece and the girls, we basically got some food. We went to the beach. We dug sandcastles. We went in the water. It was just kind of a chill day at the beach.
In the kindest possible way, it's the place where a beach bum goes to be an authentic beach bum and just chill.
Yeah. Pismo is probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite town in California. I absolutely love it. The pier is haunted. And if you haven't listened to episode 12, maybe go back and listen to that, where we talk about all of the haunted places we've camped. But there's some cool stories that revolve around Pismo Beach. But Pismo Beach is great also because it is a good jumping off point for Central California. We went up to Hearst Castle, which I had been to once as a child, and this place just like enamored me. So the day after we had our beach day in Pismo, my brother and his wife and my niece, they went back home. The four of us, it was Dan's birthday. We went up to Hearst Castle, which is in San Simeon. I thought it was the most magical place when I was like 10 years old and saw it for the first time. So we went up to Hearst Castle again, it is a castle. It's incredible. And it was built by William Randolph Hearst, the newspaper magnate. And it was built between 1919 and 1947, when basically you just showed off your wealth. We went, there's ample parking. We didn't bring the RV because we were still staying in Pismo another night, but if you needed to, they have RV parking there. They have a visitors complex kind of at the base of the mountain, and Hearst Castle is right up at the top. And so you go in, you buy your tickets, you watch a movie about Hearst Castle. It's fantastic. It really explains and shows all the pictures of this mountain being transformed into this opulent palace, basically. And then you get on a tour bus and you ride that up to the castle. So you aren't allowed to drive up there. They have tour buses that you get on that will take you up.
Yeah, and the ride up's pretty easy. Up at the top, just, I don't know, words can't describe what the actual castle itself looks like. The swimming pool is amazing. The ride down is like riding a bus through the Himalayas, and I thought my life was going to end in a fireball at the bottom of a canyon, because I had to sit at the front of the bus, and it's a flat-faced bus, and there's no guardrails, just like there's no guardrails at the Grand Canyon. And there wasn't a whole lot of margin of error for that driver to get down the hill. And I know that he does it every single day, but nevertheless, I thought at any moment he could miss the break or swerve to miss a bird, and we were going to buy the farm.
So do you remember how I said at the beginning of the episode there was going to be some tales that were exaggerated for dramatic effect? This is one of those times, because it literally was not that bad. Dan was terrified. I was okay with it. I don't know. But on our way back to Pismo Beach after Hearst Castle, I should mention actually, with Hearst Castle, there's 3 different tours you can take. So there's a main tour, and you pay for that, and it only takes you on the main floor of the castle. There's another tour that takes you on the second floor of the castle, and then there's a third tour that can take you on the outbuildings, which are guest cottages right outside the castle, and you can take the guest cottage tour, which each of those guest cottages are like 2,400 square feet. They're huge. But in my life, I have seen the main tour twice, which is the main floor. So the next time we go back, I really want to do either the upstairs or the guest house tour. But just be warned, if you're only going to get one tour, I do recommend the main floor tour, because you get a lot of the history, and some of the most amazing rooms are in there. Like, they kind of deconstructed old churches and rooms from castles in Europe, and then they shipped them over and reconstructed them in the castle. So that's probably the one to do if you only have time to do one. That's what I would recommend. But when we were done, we went back through Morro Bay and Morro Rock. If you look up Morro Rock on Google. It's a very famous rock, kind of just off the coast of California. You would probably recognize it, but Morro Bay is kind of another small little town. Doesn't have the same beachy vibe as Pismo, but a cool town to walk around, very walkable. There's like a little fishing pier at the end.
Yeah, I think we saw some seals too, didn't we?
Yeah, we saw some seals, little shops along the water, but we had the most amazing Mexican food for dinner for your birthday that night, you remember?
Yep.
So it was in Mi Casa, a restaurant in Morro Bay, and it was like authentic, home-cooked, like comfort food. And I'll put some photos on Instagram of it and also on the show notes in the blog. But oh my gosh, the plates of food were so huge. That's also where we discovered we liked Modelo Negro. The beer was fantastic, but really, really worth it. If you are driving through Morro Bay, go have lunch or dinner at Mi Casa because it was fantastic.
Yeah, it was amazing, and I think that brought us back to the park, and I think we were leaving the next day for Las Vegas, weren't we?
Yep. So that's California in a nutshell. We would probably be able to see so much more, but like I said, we bought the 3-day ticket to Disney because that's kind of what our kids wanted to do and wanted to spend time with their cousin, which was cool. So that was kind of our week. That was roughly a week in California that we spent. And so next episode, we are going to dive into our fourth leg, which kind of makes me sad. It's been fun to relive this trip, but our fourth trip takes us for a couple of days in Las Vegas, a couple of days in Moab, and then we head home through Colorado and Kansas, but we do make a really cool stop in Missouri, which we'll talk about next episode before heading home. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.